Hello. In this video, we'll be exploring LearnSmart. We're going to take a look at some of the features of LearnSmart for both the students and the teachers, how to assign it, and how to view results. But let's start with how to navigate to LearnSmart. There are a couple different ways to find LearnSmart within the platform. To find any resource, you can always head up to search for resources, type in LearnSmart, and it will navigate you there to the unit LearnSmart resources. But I think the most common way to get there would be to work your way to a module. So you can head into a module. Remember, it's really important to remember that we are at the module level resources. It's indicated up here, only showing the module information. We've got the orange up here indicating module. If you were to navigate your way into a lesson, these resources would not be in the same place. To find LearnSmart at the module level, we're just going to scroll down to the module library. Within the module library, one of the very last resources in this section is LearnSmart. LS indicates this is LearnSmart. Now, as the teacher, I can open up LearnSmart and really get a pretty good idea of what that student experience will look like. One of the really powerful features of LearnSmart in California Inspire Science is that the content in LearnSmart is our Reading Essentials resource. And if you're not familiar with Reading Essentials, what Reading Essentials is we have taken the most important concepts and standards from each lesson in Inspire, and we have condensed it and written it at 2 grade levels lower. So this is really just kind of the key ingredients or the key standards and topics for each lesson. So that's why these pages do look a little bit different from the student book pages, but it is only the most important concepts and content as well as written 2 grade levels lower. So if I were a student and I had opened LearnSmart, this is exactly what it would look like for me. I've got an overview of all of the pages off to the left. I can click on whichever one it is that I am to be starting on. Once I have picked that page, I hit that 4 square, and just clicking on the page itself will activate the page. As the student, I would go through, read the different reading selections, and eventually I would be prompted. Now I'm going through this quickly, but eventually I would be prompted over here and this practice button would start highlighting. That's telling me, the student, okay, you've read some content, now let's see if you learned what you were supposed to. The big key with LearnSmart is that it's checking for comprehension of those important topics and concepts. So these questions are going to be specifically given to the student based on the content that they have been reading. The students will go through, give their responses, indicate how sure they are of their response, and get immediate feedback. Remember, this is a formative assessment. So the idea is that the student is getting feedback on if they are understanding what they've been reading correctly. They can continue to go through, and again, they'll be getting that feedback. At some point, if the student has no idea but would like to know what the answer is, they can always select read about this. And this will take them exactly to the place in the text where they can find the answer. They can read up, head back into that, and answer the question. Now again, this is going to be constantly giving them feedback. Eventually, if
It looks like you need to read a little bit more at this point. If you agree, please click Read and return to the book.
So in this case, the student was answering many questions incorrectly. And so there's a little teacher that lives within here that's indicating, head back over to the reading and let's start reading again. Now, what the student will find on these pages this time is that there will be highlights, and these highlights are completely unique and adaptive to each student based on how they how they answered those practice questions. So as they work their way through, I'm going to head back a couple pages. As they work their way through, they will see content highlighted in yellow that they still need to study up on and focus on. And for any questions that they answered correctly, that content will be highlighted in green. So this really gives our students a good idea of what to study. It's kind of like a personalized study guide. Many of our teachers will have students just get their content this way from the beginning. They might front load or even reload content. Now remember, I clicked into this from the teacher side of things, so I'm kind of getting the teacher's view of what that student interactivity would be. But to view the student results and see how the students are doing, as the teacher, I would navigate exactly the same way I just did. But here, notice I've got this little hamburger menu. This hamburger menu, because I'm in the teacher side, gives me a variety of reports. These instructor reports will tell me how my students are doing, and I get a variety of feedback based on my students' activity on LearnSmart. Now, the best way to get the most reports and data back is to actually assign LearnSmart. So I exited out of that, and just to quickly remind you, I'm at a module and I went in, so there's the module, and I'm in the library. From the library, that's how I get to do all those things that I was just showing you, as well as be able to assign this to my students. Assigning LearnSmart has a few extra steps than what we see in any of our other digital assignments, because we get to pick exactly which topics and chapters they're going to be focusing on. So you can pick your chapter, which topics it is that you want them to focus on. You also have the opportunity to reduce the amount of content. And what that means is maybe without adjusting this, there are 30 learning targets or concepts that LearnSmart thinks the students should know within those two topic areas. And so that means that the students, before they can really get a good, they've mastered the concept score, they would need to really master most of those 30. But maybe you just want your students to get a good general idea of the really key big ideas. So you could reduce that, and the students would only be responsible for learning 18 of those 30 learning targets. This is also going to adjust the highlights that the students would see in that responsive experience when they are going through the learning and reading and practicing. Once I've got my settings where I want them, I can create the assignment. And then I'm going to be taken to a page that should look familiar if you've been creating assignments digitally here. You can change the title, the date, the time frame this is open, give any instructions, adjust which students would get this, decide how many points are possible, where in your grade book this will live, and if there's any other classes that you want that to go to. You create assignment, and then that assignment will be found just in the same place as any of our other assignments would be. So that will live on the calendar. I see that assignment here, or over in the assignments list. Now, of course, these things look slightly different on the student side, but that is where those resources will be. The other place is on the dashboard. Students will have, if that LearnSmart assignment is active for that day, that will always be there for just a 2-click way for students to get into LearnSmart.